So I'd like to begin by thanking Warren Averett for sponsoring Thang and David for taking the time to speak with us tonight. David Salters has been with Warren Averett for more than a decade and serves as leader of the firm's staffing and recruiting affiliate, Warren Averett Staffing and Recruiting, and its HR consulting group, Warren Averett Workplace. David's career includes more than 20 years of recruiting, business development, and management. He joined Warren Averett in 2010 after working at a national staffing firm where he was named Business Development Manager of the Year for 2009. David lives in Birmingham with his wife and 4 children. He's an Alabama alumnus. He's been in the BVJ top 40 under 40 and is a certified staffing professional involved in a number of charities and philanthropic activities as well. So David, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you once again for allowing me to be a guest, for allowing Warren Averett to be a sponsor. Today's topic is really a talent update. So I wanted to share with you what we are seeing in the market. So whether you are, looking to be an active candidate in the marketplace, if you're seeking to acquire talent, this is a unique market. So getting a look at what's going on and how you can take advantage of that from either side of the desk was something that Jeff thought would be important to bring to the table, and Tim. So we're gonna share that today. So just a little housekeeping. I think if you'll have questions, you can pop those in the chat box, and I'll go through the presentation, share the information, and happy to answer any questions at the end there. So as Tim mentioned, I've been in the business for a little more than 21 years. Sans I did a bit of time at Dun & Bradstreet, but I've been in the staffing and recruiting industry in Birmingham for that time. Most of our client base in our company is what I would call in the Sun Belt. So that would be from Texas to Florida. So our offices range from Houston to Birmingham, Atlanta, Tampa, et cetera. So I think I heard several of those cities in the introduction. So I hope this is a good fit and this information is relevant. I do have some Birmingham and Alabama specific data that I'm going to show you that I think is relevant as well. But as we go, is the screen up, guys? Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. So here's where we are in Q2 of 2021. So you've got the image here of the ship stuck down in the canal, which I think highlighted how fragile our supply chain really is. You've got prices going up. I highlighted lumber because that just seems to be the lowest hanging fruit, but it goes along with almost anything that you can think of. With the vaccine being more widely distributed, so businesses are trying to get back to normal. A lot of people are trying to make up for lost time for last year in the COVID shutdown. So things are moving rapidly, but as you can see in the bottom right, people are typically short-staffed these days. And so as this one individual holding up in her sign, short-staffed is a new pandemic. Please be kind to our staff. So we're seeing lots of situations where the staffing just doesn't meet the demand. And for a lot of these commodities that are short on supply, it's not necessarily always the raw materials that short on supply. It's the individuals, the labor to manufacture the process, to prepare that to go to market has been the real slowdown in the economy. But what happened so far, this is as of the March jobs report, that the U.S., the official unemployment rate is showing 6%. And in Alabama, it's 3.8. And this seems to cause confusion because it doesn't seem like there's unemployment that high. As difficult as it is, it seems to get talent these days. So let's dig a little deeper. These are the official unemployment numbers for most of North Alabama. I'll highlight the 2 largest, which is Jefferson County, where Birmingham is showing 3.8% unemployment. And in Madison, where Huntsville is situated, is 2.5%. So these are showing really low numbers, much lower than the national averages, which are still showing high, considering how difficult most people have been commenting on how hard it is to find good employees. So in the March, we'll cover April in just a minute. In that March jobs report, the Economist missed the projection wildly. There were almost 1 million jobs added to the economy in March, 916,000, and so that was way ahead of projections. But a large number of those were in hospitality, and so as people are getting back into hotels, getting back to travel, that was where the big pickup was. And that could have been some timing. Some of those jobs easily could have just started in April, but they got a head start. So this big number pops up in March with 900,000 jobs. But if you note the very last statement there, nearly 2/3 of that were in leisure and hospitality. 2/3 of that was within food and drinking places. So restaurants and bars trying to get back open. We're adding lots of jobs, and this is even pre the CDC mask change recently. So you can see where that was going. I'll show you this next slide. This is called the staffing index. The best way I can explain this for the staffing and recruiting industry, this is essentially the Dow Jones of the staffing industry. So it's always a great indicator. This metric follows GDP really closely. And so the left to right, that's annual. So January to January. If you look at the red and yellow lines at the top, that V in the middle, that's 4th of July. If you look at the V toward the right, that's Thanksgiving. The big drop off at the end is Christmas. This is year over year. So the big ugly brown line at the bottom is 2020. You can see the shutdown in 2020 and that very, very slow climb back up throughout the year. But I think that shows you, that reflects to you where companies were, how hiring regained and rebuilt itself in the fourth quarter. And it has remained strong through this quarter. So the short blue line is this year, and you can see it is tracking and trending toward 2018 and 2019 numbers, which were record years in the staffing and recruiting industries. As a matter of fact, 2018, which is the red line, was the best in several years. And the reason it was better than 19 was not due to a lack of sales, it was a lack of candidates. So there's only so many transactions can occur if there's no inventory with candidates. And that's really where we're going now into the second and third quarter. Our industry economist predicted the uptick in the fourth quarter. They predicted a strong first quarter. And this is one thing I want to share with you all today. They also predicted that until some of the stimulus money runs out and everyone's racing to make up for lost time, there's going to be a bit of a grind in the second and third quarter to find employees. All right, so the demand is there, just like there's demand for lumber and concrete and steel and chlorine tablets and fuel and everything else. It's the fulfillment that's going to be the problem. So that is the projection on the industry. This is a year-over-year graph of the staffing industry as a whole, and you can see toward the middle of the screen, the 2009, so that's the beginning of the Great Recession there, and that year-over-year increase, and then the setback in 2020. The 2021 is obviously a prediction. This is from the American Staffing Association, and the reason it does not eclipse 18 and 19 is, again, uncertainty. We still don't know a lot about how the world's going to reopen the rest of the year, but this the lack of candidate flow that we're seeing from a low labor participation rate, which I'll show you some more information on that in just a bit. But in terms of within the industry, where is the hiring projected to take place this year? And this is from December. This is proving to be true for us, the numbers that we're seeing. And you can see for those of us in the room, finance and accounting, double-digit growth projected for this year. And really double-digit growth across all industries except for life sciences, healthcare, and IT, and simply because they grew so much last year. It's self-explanatory why healthcare grew last year with all the COVID situations, life sciences with research and development, and then IT, as so many companies deployed a remote workforce that really had a positive impact on that industry as well. a lot of people ask, what about education? How can education be projected to increase 30% this year? Because they're going to reopen schools hopefully in the fall and get things back to normal. And a lot of the staff, the faculty in schools remained employed and conducted virtual school, but the food service, the janitors, the bus drivers, all that went on the bench last year. That's all projected to come back this year. So everything that would support education should be coming back this year. But you can see, all in all, there's about a 14% total growth projection in hiring this year, which is so far coming to fruition. And all that's tracking along. And then this April jobs report came out. So those of you who saw it, the forecast was wildly missed again. So the economists projected 1 million jobs to be added, very similar to March, but only 266,000 jobs were added. So a really bad miss there. So a couple of things, but beyond so few jobs being added is that the economists don't know what they can't quite get their arms around this market. It's very hard to predict. And the one wild card that's keeping that jobs number low is stimulus. At this rate, for those of you looking to hire employees, you seek to hire employees, your biggest competition is just people staying at home in some cases. And the good news is there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I think as of yesterday, there were 18 states that have announced they're ending their federal portion of the unemployment, enhanced unemployment, but there's a child tax credit increase on the way as well. That's going to maybe offset some of that. But projections are much of this could go away by the end of the third quarter. So those of you that are having a hard time finding employees, the fourth quarter should be better for all of us seeking employees. If you are seeking a job, use this to your advantage. The market is still very tight. For staffing, contract type things, usually you're catching someone at the end of one gig and picking up another one. On direct placement recruiting, companies are going to have to incentivize someone to leave a job that they're in and come to their company and perform a similar task. And I'll tell you what you're competing with on that. And that's not stimulus. That's going to be work flexibility, PTO, and those things. That's the greatest commodity right now in recruiting, is not necessarily a salary or a wage, but it's flexibility. And that's a big change that we've seen over this year. I'll tell you more about that as we go along. One note here. So Bank of America put out a report, and they said that essentially if you make $32,000 a year or less, you should take the money and stay home. That's not a career advice. That's just the break-even point on numbers. To me, what we've seen as a recruiting firm, it really goes beyond that, because if break-even is $32,000, well, would you not stay home if you normally make $40,000 for a large portion of your income? That's where we're seeing a lot of people just not answering ads. We spend a tremendous amount of money on Indeed and LinkedIn and lots of job ads, and just watching the lack of responses from jobs at certain levels. We had an AP rollout, which we don't do a ton of that. We had an AP rollout, and the pay rate was like $22 an hour. We had it out for 4 days. It never got clicked one time. It never got clicked on, which, we measured the click rates and those things. So it's I think the term is an unmotivated, a disengaged workforce. So how does this add up? So if you look, this next chart, this is from Pew Research, talks about the adjusted unemployment rate versus the official. So when the Department of Labor puts out their official unemployment rate, it really doesn't account for those not actively seeking jobs. It's just the people active and reporting a job activity. So that 22.7 was from last year, really part of the height of the shutdown. But even earlier this year, it's showing significantly higher unemployment rates than what the official rate is of 6.6. Their projection is it's closer to 10%. All right. So when that April jobs report came out, the number moved from 6% national unemployment up to 6.1. So the adjusted rate increased as well. What's driving that is what's the low labor participation rate. And in this chart, you can see the big V in the middle is the shutdown last year. But you can tell we have not recovered from the shutdown, and just not as many candidates are participating in job-seeking activities. They're just out. They've just dropped out for a number of reasons. Some of them still have COVID fears. Some of them are caretakers. They don't trust schools to be open or remain open long enough for them to commit to a job. A lot of feedback from candidates is, I found that I needed to spend more time at home. I didn't intend to do this, but once I stayed home, I found out that my family needed me more than I admitted. And so therefore I will be seeking some job with some type of flexibility moving forward. And those people are just out of the job market at this time. So with usually higher unemployment does not equate to this, but what we have is inflation in wages. So here we are, wages are increasing, even though we have a relatively high number of unemployed individuals, but that's because they're not participating. So those who are employed, usually who you want to join your team, usually they are already engaged in some job, whether it be a gig job, a contract job, or another direct placement job. Those individuals are at extremely high demand, and that's driving wages up. So here's some commentary on that. If you're an employer, I beg you, don't be fooled by that unemployment number and think that you can come into the negotiation table lowballing. I think that's not going to be fruitful for you. If you're an employee seeking a new role, it's not wise to try to gouge someone. The point is, we all need to be at market. This shows us market has increased a little bit. And if you're an employer, you don't have to lead the market in compensation. But you can't be below market and compensation. Being at market gets you a ticket to the game, and you can play the game. You can be competitive. But if you're below market in compensation, it's extremely difficult to compete in this market. So what that leaves us really with the supply and demand. We talked about it from microchips. I think the average car now has about 24 microchips, and it's not necessarily the raw materials, but it's the human capital that it takes to produce and ship all that. Steel, lumber, concrete, household appliances, chlorine tablets. Nina, I think you said you're in Houston. The number one producer of chlorine tablets, it's summertime, everyone's got their pool going, right? Was a chemical plant in Louisiana, and it was burned by a fire started by a hurricane last year. And so the only two, I think, other producers are, I know Oxy is one of them, and that's not their primary business, and they can't support. So all this, it can't recover fast enough. But then it comes to people. The supply and demand it all comes down to the people issue. So one thing to keep in mind is this idea of being competitive compensation wise. And one of the things is so many companies are sharing with us that they're going to reduce their office space. They're going to spend less on brick and mortar. Their workforce just looks different. And you need to, I would advise you to adjust to that. I would advise you as a candidate to take advantage of that. If you think you can achieve some more work-life balance. Some jobs can't be work from home. Some jobs, like Larry and I, we there's a lot of things we can do at Warren Averett from home, but there's some things we need to be in the office for, right? We need to see clients, we need to see our teammates, but there's this change in office space, and so I'm leaving this with the recruiting tip number one. offer hybrid work options at any turn that you can, as an employer. Society of Human Resources, SHRM, they did a vaccination survey, and 52% of employees, these are people already with a job, said they would choose to work from home permanently if they'd given the option. All right, so this is really kind of a COVID fear type thing, about people coming back into the office. 28% said they don't plan on receiving the vaccine, even if it costs them their job. So a lot of people kind of draw a hard line on this, and so if you don't offer hybrid options, you're going to run into some barriers with the way certain people feel about the vaccine and health in their work environment. In terms of working a flexible schedule, FlexJobs.com surveyed 4,000 workers. 65% said they want to become full-time remote employees. 65% said, I can do what I do at home. 31% of those said they would prefer a hybrid work arrangement with a blend of in-person and remote. So between the 65 and the 31, that's virtually everybody almost, and that's the major crowd. They're saying that I either need to work remote or have some type of blended environment. 81% of firms expect an increase or significant increase in people working remotely going forward. And 30%, here's back to the office space, predicted they would shrink their office footprint in the future to accommodate this new way of working. Okay, so Deloitte just did a survey recently, and it was something staggering, like 88% of companies are going to spend less on office space moving forward, less. There are a few industry outliers, but for the most part, people are going to spend less money. I will tell you what we are hearing from candidates as a professional recruiting firm is that's the number one commodity that you can offer is some type of flexibility. Is this the first question candidates are asking? How much time am I required in the office? What will it look like in the future? What will it look like in Q3, Q4, and next year? A lot of companies can't answer that yet. I'll tell you, at Warren Averett, we're reopening on August 2nd. That's when we're going back and opening things up, and we've given people an option, and they can work the schedules that they wish. And you know, for example, if you don't work at least 3 days a week in the office, you don't get dedicated office space. So you don't have an office or a cube, but you can hotel all you want. You can come and go as much as you like, but if you're not going to be there a certain amount of time, then let's make that office, let's use the office space to the best of our benefit. So you can see where that's going. So I encourage you, if you're in a position to have influence, is to offer flexibility. I wouldn't tell you how to run your business, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you what you're facing in the market if you're trying to be competitive. This is what you're facing, and this is what some of your competitors are offering that can give them an advantage. Recruiting tip number 2 is consider mothers. This chart shows, back to that labor participation rate, this chart shows that mothers, the black line, have had the hardest time re-engaging in the workforce. They have the lowest participation. A lot of that is rooted in this newfound time to spend with their family, but a lot of that is failure to trust in schools. I can't trust my school to be open, therefore I really can't commit to commuting to a job every day. So I'm just going to pull back and just wait and see. So if you're an employer, I encourage you to consider mothers and consider them in an alternative work situation as a way to close a gap. For example, we can bang our head on the wall all day and try to find, an accounting support person for $40,000 a year that you would like to have in the office, commute in or out. And that job, it could take us months to fill that job, if ever. Would you consider hiring 2 or 3 moms that possess the skill set? If they're an AP, does it matter when those invoices are keyed in at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. or 5 a.m.? If that doesn't matter, would you consider bringing someone on a contract basis to fill the gap instead of just having the job completely unfilled, because creates so much stress on your existing team to carry that? Because right now what people are doing is just spreading the work out to other people, and of course you're going to burn them out, and they could leave. So think about who's been sidelined here, and can you tap into that part of the job market that shows up that does not show up in the unemployment number. That's part of that disengaged workforce. Number 3, recruit nationally. If you're not doing that already, we're just living in a different world today. And if you're in a market, as an employer, if you're in a market that maybe you're not as competitive in, now's your chance to go grab someone in another place. I mean, places, just in general, people move from the north to the south. They don't move from the south to the north, right? We experience that all the time in recruiting. So there could easily be good talent in the north that you could have working from home that you would never really have thought about before. If it's very competitive here, grab someone in a different marketplace that can do the job. We've got the technology and take advantage of that as well. If you're a candidate, expand your job search. Search the entire nation and look for opportunities to contribute to a company, no matter where you sit. Again, same thing works on the other side of the table here. You can do your job in some cases anywhere. If it takes a little travel in between, fine, but the idea is you may not have to uproot your family if you don't want to, because companies are taking a look at people outside their geographical areas. Lastly, from an employer standpoint, like we say in all M&A and all business transactions, time kills all deals, right? That is true in recruiting as well. So we all have a lot to do, but I encourage you, as you are working through candidate flow, to work quickly as you can. A candidate's window of opportunity is only so long. It's different for everyone, but being non-responsive, dragging your feet is basically a turnoff for the candidates. They feel like you're not interested, and because of the market, they're almost certain to have other opportunities. So taking too long to make a decision, being too picky, having unreasonable barriers. We have some clients that are married to certain assessments that really some assessments work in some cases. Sometimes they're an unnecessary barrier. Whatever that is, try to close your time gap. And the quicker you can make an offer and get someone working, the sooner they're off the market and not being recruited and courted by someone else. So that's what we have right now in Q2. I'm not sure if any of that surprises you folks, or if there's new information in there, but I'm happy to answer any questions from a candidate perspective, from an employer perspective, and I'm happy to do so.
David, that's fantastic. Thank you. That was a great, just informative and timely and so forth. So let's just leave it open. Anything's on the table, guys. Just whatever's on your mind, that thoughts or questions you have that triggered from what David just shared with us.
First of all, I guess I have a question. That was a great presentation. Very much appreciated that.
Sure.
What does your study show as it relates with age versus in the markets, in today's markets? In other words, is there that wisdom tax coming into play and things along those lines? What are your thoughts there?
I think age and wisdom and experience would work to someone's advantage, especially if they're trying a remote situation. A lot of hesitancy from employers is trust. I've heard so many employers say, I don't trust people to work remotely from the office. And I think to have someone with a lot of runway behind them, it's easier to come to the table and say, you may have a hard time trusting a younger person with less experience, less maturity, but I'm a pro. I've been doing this a long time. My don't ask me, take my references, right, and see if I'm trustworthy. So I think that would work in your favor. We don't really see a lot of that. Usually the only thing when we hear clients tell us we want someone younger, it's really just code for cheaper. It's not necessarily that they want someone younger, but the age thing is usually always the experience is always, it's a huge advantage, unless you've just completely priced yourself out of the market.
Thank you.
Did that answer that what you wanted to?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
David, I've got a question. Let me ask you, what thoughts do you have and recommendations would you have with senior level financial people in transition, which somewhere at a FING meeting, I heard in Atlanta 5 or 6 years ago, the speaker said something that always stuck with me. He said the average tenure for a mid-market CFO or senior level financial person nowadays is I think he said 22 months or something like that. And to me, someone that does project-based work, you know, all the time, to me, I said, that's just a long project. But and there is a lot, you know, with M&As and just management changes and all the private equity, you know, acquisitions and all that, there is you know, the tenure for these roles are good, solid people, you know, just get displaced. But what's your thoughts on the best way they can, if they go 6, 9, 12 months, sometimes to find the next full-time project or whatever you want to call it, permanent role, what, in terms of doing contract work or gig work, or what are your thoughts on that in this climate?
Yeah, that's always going to be a positive. And, you know, when we put someone to work on a contract or interim basis, we know that, you know, they could easily get a direct offer at any day, and our clients understand. Anytime you engage in something like that, you take that risk. So there's no harm in doing that. It's only positive. You're going to gain some new experience. I do encourage you to add that to your resume. And I think I heard you say there's a resume peer review group, so that's really great. As long as the story is, the narrative is correct, so it doesn't look like you're just hopping jobs, but as long as it describes that, you know, you were conducting different projects, and like you said, that's another project. And when there are shorter durations, look, mature hiring entities understand. You know, I can't tell you how often we get a call from Larry can tell you this, from our clients who private equity firms, and they buy a new company. One of the first things they want to do is put their controller in or their CFO in, and so it's just part of the business. People understand that, and it's really not a black mark of any type. If you have some turnover, just explain it through the resume process. Keep it concise, and nothing wrong with that. And if you're in the interim, yeah, any experience that you can get and add that to the resume. And that's when when you're working. If you happen to have you know, an inside source somewhere, referral based. That's what this group is all about, right? Getting to know people that can be your advocate, might be a recruiter like myself, but whoever your advocate is can also speak to that. You know, that, you know what, Jeff's been doing interim work, which I think speaks to, you know, your character and your desire to learn more and even grow your skill set forever. So that's always very positive. And I never really have any concerns. I actually enjoy talking to professionals that are confident when they tell me how a role ended. Well, I worked at a company for 20 years. There was an ownership change. I don't know what the next statement is, so they made a change, or I made a change, and really no one frowns upon that, because things, especially when there's ownership changes, there's different cultures, there's different protocol. Everything can change, and so that's really not a negative thing at all. It needs to be explained either through conversations or on the resume.
Thank you.
So a couple of folks said they had just started new jobs. Any feedback there on what was positive about that process? Anything that you heard in what you saw tonight go along with that, conflict with that? We share with the group maybe what did that look like from an onboarding and recruiting process?
If someone's speaking in their own mute, we can't.
I think Nina's trying to unmute there.
I was trying to unmute for the last 30 seconds. It wasn't working. Yeah, so you mentioned about doing contract work. My full-time employment came to end in July. And so I did some contract work in the meantime, while I was trying to find my next role. And this is the longest I've ever been unemployed. So I went from July till this week. So almost about 10 months unemployed. And I worked a contract for about half of that. It was a really great experience. I had 2 contract jobs, and I wasn't really sure, what to expect the contract roles, but they're really enjoy them. Real low stress, decent pay, good people to work with. So it's a nice way to, I wouldn't say I enhanced my skill set during that time with those contract roles, but it definitely kept me engaged and, kind of helped my confidence level from crashing after having interview after interview and, not landing any jobs. So it was just nice knowing that at least I was still working or, at least I had something going while I was, still looking for a permanent role. And it's funny, I joined Feng just a few months ago, so I hadn't done a whole lot of networking with Feng. I hadn't done a whole lot of networking prior to Feng either, honestly. Most of my jobs have always come through recruiters. And this job actually came through Indeed. So I think it's the first time I ever got a job, through one of the job boards. Ideally, I probably wouldn't have taken it if I hadn't been unemployed for so long. The pay and benefits weren't quite what I wanted, but there's potential for growth. And so, I want to stick it out for a year or two to, kind of see where that goes. As far as onboarding and all, it was pretty quick. I mean, they interviewed me on a Wednesday. I had my second interview on a Thursday. On Tuesday, I had an offer. I went back and forth and negotiating for a few days. They, met me halfway, and then I accepted. So within a couple of weeks, start to finish, it was over. So it was a pretty quick process.
Yeah, that's good to hear that they move quickly. Kind of speaks to the time kills all deals. Very good to hear a company move quickly through that. That's great, and congratulations on the new role.
Thank
you. Speaking of Indeed, for those of you who are seeking a job, Indeed and LinkedIn are the two places that are leading the industry in terms of activity, number of candidates. I really like the fact that you guys have this networking group. To me, that would be more effective than almost anything. But if I assume they're still in business, but the Monsters and Career Builders and those things are long forgotten about. Matter of fact, Indeed and LinkedIn are chock full of some of their former employees, but that's where the action is and that's where the jobs are. If you don't have alerts set up on Indeed, if you're looking for a job, they'll email you every day. If you'll just key in your search term, whether it's CFO, controller, or whatever, in a location, and you can set up a different one for each location or a different alert for each role type that you're seeking, and then your inbox, they'll come to you. You don't even have to look at that. But that's where all the employers are spending their advertising and recruiting dollars, is on Indeed and LinkedIn. There's going to be some other ones if you've heard of. There's a couple out there, but if they're not spending money on LinkedIn and Indeed, I wouldn't worry about missing them too much. That's where the action is.
Well, guys, we're getting close. We're going to end sharp within about 5 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, by 8:45, and it's 8:37 according to my clock. Are there any other questions? I'm going to have a couple of closing remarks here in just a minute, but before we shut this segment down with what we're talking about, any other questions or comments you've got?
I have a quick one going back to your presentation, David. The slide that showed how people are wanting to have flexibility and remote in their work wasn't really as surprising. The percentages were higher than I was expecting, but I have a hard time. You hear about Jamie Dimon, yesterday, everyone reported back to work. And you hear about some of these companies that are I don't know, traditionalists or whatever you want to call it, that are just demanding that. I just find that so incongruent with what definitely is the at least anecdotal evidence out there.
Yeah. So you hear some of those. You hear others, like Google and Twitter, that they said they're never going back in some cases. But what would happen is if Jamie Dimon made that announcement, where do you think every recruiter is lobbing phone calls into today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
Right. So knowing that let's say there's a similar job that has flexible hours or some type of hybrid schedule, that just puts your workforce at risk. Knowing that there's a company that we know of in town in Birmingham today that made a hard line. They're coming back to whatever the date is. And we hear it in the recruiting circles, the sharks are circling, and so it could be tough to stave off some attrition if it's rigid like that. Not saying it's the wrong thing. My job is to share with you what the market is. So that's what the market will bear.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We've got time for another question if somebody's got anything or anything else you'd want to add, David.
Now, just thanks again for the opportunity. Thanks for letting Warren Averett sponsor this. And if anyone has follow-up questions, my contact information is on the final slide there. And I think that'll be distributed, right, Charlotte, to the group. So my contact information is there. Should you want to talk to me directly, it would be my pleasure to speak to you.
Great. Well, thanks again, David. That was great. Thanks all of you guys for being here, and ladies, whether you